My name is Sylvia Bradford, 68 years old, and I never imagined my only son would betray me this way. After 23 days in the hospital fighting pneumonia, I returned to find strangers living in my home. When Thomas told me, "It's not yours anymore, don't come back," I simply smiled and said, "Enjoy it." Little did they know what was coming next. If you're watching this right now, let me know where you're tuning in from. Hit that like and subscribe button, and prepare yourself for what happened 1 week later. I've lived in my beautiful 4-bedroom colonial for over 40 years. My late husband James and I purchased it when we were newlyweds, pouring our hearts into every renovation and garden bed. The neighborhood has transformed around us, property values skyrocketing to where my home is now worth nearly $2 million. Since James passed away 12 years ago from heart failure, I've maintained this house meticulously, seeing it as our shared legacy. Thomas, my only child, grew up in this home. We were always close, especially after his father died. He would visit every Sunday for dinner, help with household repairs, and call me nearly daily. That closeness began changing 8 years ago when he married Diana. Diana Walker came from what they call new money. Her parents, Harold and Margaret, had a successful real estate business, but had recently faced financial troubles. From the beginning, there was tension between Diana and me. She would make subtle comments about my outdated decor, or how the house was too much for one person. I tried to overlook these remarks for Thomas's sake. The Walkers always seemed particularly interested in my home. Margaret would visit and ask detailed questions about the square footage when certain appliances had been upgraded and how much I thought the property was worth. At the time, I assumed she was just making conversation or comparing it to properties she sold through their business. When James died, he left everything to me. Our financial advisor helped set up accounts and investments that would provide comfortably for my future. I had updated my will 5 years ago, planning to leave most assets to Thomas, with smaller amounts designated for my 2 favorite charities, the local animal shelter and a scholarship fund at the community college where I taught English before retiring. Thomas never knew the exact details of my will, though he assumed he would inherit everything. I preferred keeping financial matters private, something my husband had always insisted upon. "Family and money discussions rarely end well," James would say. How prophetic those words would prove to be. The first troubling signs began about 2 years ago. Diana started making comments about senior living communities, sending me brochures for upscale retirement homes. "Wouldn't it be nice not to worry about maintaining such a large house?" she would say with practiced concern. When I explained I preferred my independence, she would exchange glances with Thomas. Thomas's visits became less frequent. Sunday dinners transformed into brief coffee stops, and he always seemed to be checking his watch. When I invited them for holidays, Diana would invent excuses about prior commitments with her family. On the rare occasions they did visit, Margaret would wander through my home studying the crown molding or commenting on the potential of various spaces. "This would make a perfect playroom for the grandchildren," Margaret once said, standing in my craft room where I enjoyed quilting. The statement struck me as odd. Why would my grandchildren need a permanent playroom in my house? Harold, Diana's father, began offering unsolicited advice about home repairs. "That roof will need replacing soon," or "These older houses have plumbing issues you should address before they become disasters." Each comment felt less like friendly advice and more like a property assessment. I remained polite, but grew increasingly uncomfortable with their interest in my home. Thomas seemed oblivious, or perhaps willfully ignorant of the underlying tension. When I tried mentioning it to him privately, he would brush it off. "They're just being friendly, Mom. Diana's parents know real estate, so they notice these things." One particular evening stands out in my memory. The Walkers had invited themselves over for dinner, something that was happening with disturbing frequency. After the meal, I overheard Margaret in my master bedroom. "This could easily be converted to an ensuite," she was saying to Diana. "Knock down this wall, expand the bathroom. It would add tremendous value." When I entered the room, they both startled, then quickly smiled. "Your home has such wonderful potential," Margaret said smoothly. "We were just admiring the layout." The following week, Thomas called asking if I'd considered downsizing. Diana and I were thinking, "Mom, The kids need more space, and this neighborhood has the best schools. Maybe we could discuss some options that would benefit everyone. I changed the subject, uncomfortable with where the conversation was heading, but the seed of suspicion had been planted. That night I called my longtime friend and attorney, Frank Reynolds. We'd known each other since college, and he had handled all our family's legal matters for decades. Just as a precaution, I told Frank, I'd like to review my estate planning. The conversation we had that day would prove to be one of the most important of my life, though I wouldn't realize it for months to come. The pneumonia came on suddenly. What started as a mild cough after gardening in the cool spring air quickly escalated to fever chills and difficulty breathing. When I couldn't make it from my bedroom to the kitchen without gasping for air, I called Thomas. To his credit, he rushed over immediately and drove me to the emergency room. The doctors admitted me on the spot, concerned about my oxygen levels and the fluid building in my lungs. "We need to get this under control," the doctor said, already ordering antibiotics and breathing treatments. Thomas seemed genuinely worried, staying until they settled me in a room. "I'll take care of everything, Mom," he assured me. "Just focus on getting better." Before leaving, he asked for my house keys. "I'll water your plants and make sure everything's okay." I handed over my keyring without hesitation. It never occurred to me this simple act would change everything. The first week in the hospital was a blur of medications tests and fitful sleep interrupted by nurses taking vital signs. My condition worsened before it improved, with the infection proving resistant to the first round of antibiotics. The doctors moved me to intensive care when my oxygen levels dropped dangerously low. Thomas visited daily that first week. He would bring small items from home, my favorite slippers, a novel I'd been reading, my phone charger. Diana came once, standing at the doorway, rather than entering, fully concerned about hospital germs, with young children at home. By the second week, as stronger antibiotics began working, Thomas's visits became less frequent. "Work is crazy," he'd explain. "Diana's handling the kids alone." I understood, and didn't want to be a burden, so I encouraged him to focus on his family. It was during this second week I met Linda Stevens, a night shift nurse with a warm smile and no-nonsense attitude. Linda took special interest in her patients, spending extra minutes chatting whenever her duties allowed. After several nights of her care, we developed a friendly rapport. "My son should be coming by today," I mentioned one evening as Linda checked my IV. "He's been so busy lately." Linda hesitated, her expression shifting subtly. "Thomas, tall guy, dark hair, drives that silver SUV." When I confirmed, she seemed to choose her words carefully. "I saw him yesterday, actually. Not here. I live on Maple Street, just a few blocks from you." "From me?" I asked, surprised. "Well, I recognized your address from your chart. I saw your son and some other people moving furniture into your house. I assumed you knew." My confusion must have been evident. Linda quickly backpedaled. "Maybe they were just dropping something off. I only drove by, didn't stop to see exactly what was happening." That night I tried calling Thomas several times. He finally answered around 9, sounding distracted with children's voices in the background. "Is everything okay at the house?" I asked directly. "Fine, Mom, everything's fine. Just watering your plants like I promised." "Are you moving furniture around?" A pause. "Just rearranged a little to vacuum thoroughly. How are you feeling?" His deflection raised more questions than it answered, but in my weakened state, I lacked the energy to press further. The next day brought another disturbing development, when Martha Jacobs was wheeled into my room. The hospital was at capacity, requiring some patients to share accommodations. Martha, 74, and recovering from hip surgery, turned out to be a blessing in disguise. "Retired attorney," she introduced herself, extending a firm handshake from her bed. "Family law and estate planning. And you?" "Retired English teacher," I replied, currently trying to breathe properly again. We became fast friends. Martha had a sharp mind and sharper wit, having spent 40 years navigating the complexities of family disputes. When I mentioned Linda's odd sighting, Martha's eyes narrowed. "Who has access to your home right now?" she asked. "Just my son. He has my keys to check on things." "And his wife? What's your relationship like with her?" When I described the dynamics with Diana and her parents, Martha grew increasingly concerned. Sylvia, I don't want to alarm you, but I've seen this scenario play out hundreds of times. Adult children or in-laws taking advantage when an elderly parent is hospitalized or incapacitated. Thomas wouldn't do that. I defended, though, with less conviction than I intended. Martha raised an eyebrow. Call him right now. Ask directly if someone else is staying in your home. I did. This time Thomas answered quickly but seemed rushed. Mom, can I call you back? We're just sitting down to dinner. Thomas, is someone staying at my house? Another pause, longer this time. Diana's parents had some plumbing issues at their condo. It's just temporary while repairs are made. They're actually helping us look after your place. Without asking me? My voice rose despite my weakened condition. You've been so sick, Mom. I didn't want to worry you with trivial matters. The doctor said stress would slow your recovery. Before I could respond, he added, I really need to go. The kids are waiting. Love you, bye. The line went dead. Martha had heard every word from her bed. Temporary, my foot, she muttered. Sylvia, when you're discharged, don't tell your son. We need to see what's really happening. Over the next few days, Linda provided more information confirming what Martha suspected. She'd seen moving trucks, furniture being carried in, and Diana's parents appearing settled. They've been bringing in groceries, getting mail. It looks like they're living there, not just visiting. Martha, despite her recent surgery, became my strongest advocate. My granddaughter Samantha is a lawyer too. She'll come visit tomorrow. Let's get some advice before these people establish residency in your home. Samantha proved to be as sharp as her grandmother. She brought legal notepads and asked detailed questions about my home ownership will and relationship with Thomas. The good news, Samantha explained after our discussion, is that they can't legally take your house without your consent. The bad news is that removing unwanted occupants can be complicated, especially if they claim they had permission. Which they absolutely did not, I emphasized. Then we need to document everything. When you're discharged, we'll go to your home unannounced. Record whatever happens. Don't get angry or make threats. Just establish that they're there without permission. As my discharge date approached, my doctor seemed pleased with my progress. The infection is clearing nicely. You'll need to continue antibiotics and rest, but you can do that at home. I kept this information from Thomas, telling him instead that the doctors wanted to keep me under observation for several more days. Linda, who had become my confidant, agreed to drive me home on her day off. We'll see exactly what's happening, she promised, and I'll be right there with you for support. Martha, though being discharged herself, provided her personal phone number. Call me immediately afterward. If they give you any trouble, Samantha is on standby. The 23 days I spent in that hospital changed me fundamentally. I entered as a trusting mother and left as a woman prepared for battle. The ride home from the hospital was tense. Linda tried making conversation to distract me, but my thoughts remained fixed on what awaited. I had spent 23 days fighting pneumonia, but the real fight was just beginning. Remember what Samantha said? Linda reminded me as we turned onto my street. Stay calm, document everything, and establish that you never gave permission for anyone to live there. My neighborhood looked peaceful in the late afternoon light. Pristine lawns, mature trees, children's bicycles in driveways. Normalcy that contrasted sharply with the chaos in my mind. As we approached my house, the first sign something was amiss: 3 unfamiliar cars in my driveway. One belonged to Thomas, but the others were Harold's silver Lexus and a red SUV I recognized as Margaret's. They really moved in. I whispered, my suspicions confirmed. Linda squeezed my hand reassuringly before pulling to the curb. My legs felt weak as I approached my own front door, partly from my recent illness and partly from anxiety. The doorbell I pressed was one James had installed decades ago, its familiar chime now sounding like a warning. Diana opened the door, her expression cycling rapidly from surprise to alarm to forced politeness. Sylvia, we weren't expecting you until next week. Her eyes darted past me to Linda, then back. Who's this? My nurse and friend Linda, I replied, stepping forward as if to enter. Diana didn't move aside immediately. Thomas? She called over her shoulder, a slight edge of panic in her voice. Your mother is here. I heard movement inside, my inside, and caught glimpses of changed decor through the doorway. My antique console table was gone, replaced by a modern glass piece I'd never seen before. The walls, previously adorned with family photos, now displayed abstract artwork. Thomas appeared behind Diana, his face paling when he saw me. Mom, you're out of the hospital. Why didn't you call? I wanted to surprise you. I said, my voice steadier than I felt. May I come into my home? The emphasis on my wasn't subtle. Thomas and Diana exchanged glances before reluctantly stepping aside. What I saw inside staggered me more than any physical illness could have. My living room furniture was gone. In its place stood Harold and Margaret's sectional sofa and entertainment center. Family photos had been removed from the mantel, replaced with their vacation souvenirs and formal portraits. Even the curtains had been changed from my soft cream drapes to heavy burgundy ones I recognized from their condo. Harold and Margaret themselves sat at my dining room table, their dining room table that had replaced mine, looking like they'd been caught in the middle of a crime, which in many ways they had been. Sylvia. Margaret recovered first, rising with a brittle smile. What a lovely surprise. We were just about to have dinner. Will you join us? Where are my things? I asked, ignoring her invitation. An uncomfortable silence followed. Thomas finally answered. We moved some stuff to the garage to make room, just temporarily. Temporarily, I echoed. Until we figure out the next steps, Diana interjected smoothly. With your health concerns, we thought having Mom and Dad here would help with your care once you returned. The lie was so transparent it almost took my breath away. Linda stood silently beside me, her presence keeping me anchored. I'd like to see my bedroom, I stated, moving toward the stairs. Diana quickly stepped forward. Actually, Mom and Dad are using the master bedroom since it has the attached bathroom. We set up the guest room for you. I felt blood rush to my face. You gave away my bedroom. Thomas finally intervened. Mom, can we talk outside for a minute? Without waiting for an answer, he took my elbow and guided me toward the front door. Linda made to follow, but Thomas said, Just my mother, please. I nodded to Linda that it was okay. On the porch, Thomas's demeanor changed entirely. The concern vanished, replaced by cold determination. Mom, this isn't going to work, he began. Harold and Margaret lost their condo. The real estate market crashed, their business failed, and they were facing homelessness. This house is too big for just you, and you were supposed to be in the hospital for weeks longer. So you moved them in without asking me into my home where I've lived for 40 years. We were going to discuss it once you were better, but now that you're here, I need you to understand something. His voice hardened. They have nowhere else to go, and Diana won't have her parents on the street. We've made a decision as a family. A decision about my house? I was incredulous. Thomas looked at me directly, words falling like stones. It's not yours anymore, don't come back. The betrayal in that moment was absolute. My son, my only child, the person I had nurtured and loved unconditionally for 42 years, was choosing his in-laws over me. Was stealing my home while I recovered from a life-threatening illness. I could have screamed, could have threatened, could have broken down in tears. Instead, a strange calm washed over me. Frank's voice echoed in my mind. Sometimes the best revenge is letting people think they've won. I simply smiled and said, Enjoy it. Thomas blinked clearly, expecting a different reaction. Before he could respond, I turned and walked back to Linda's waiting car, never looking back, even as he called after me. As Linda drove away, I finally allowed tears to fall. They took everything, I whispered. My home, my memories, my son. Linda reached across to squeeze my hand. Not everything, Sylvia, and not for long. She took me to her modest apartment, insisting I stay with her until things were sorted out. My spare room isn't much, but it's yours as long as you need it. That evening I called Martha and Samantha, explaining everything that had happened. Samantha was furious. "We can have them removed immediately. I'll file emergency papers tomorrow morning." "No," I said, surprising myself with my composure. "I want to handle this my way. Give me 1 week." "What happens in a week?" Linda asked after I'd ended the call. I smiled through my tears. "They find out about the surprise I prepared months ago when I first suspected something like this might happen." 6 months ago, I explained to Linda as we sat in her cozy kitchen that evening. "I noticed something troubling. Thomas and Diana kept bringing up retirement communities asking about my will, and the Walkers seemed obsessed with my house. It was subtle at first, comments about the neighborhood's value, questions about my mortgage status." Linda poured me another cup of tea. "So you suspected they were after your property?" "Not exactly. I thought maybe they were concerned about inheritance taxes or wanted to help me plan for the future. But something felt off, so I called Frank, my attorney, just to review my affairs." Frank Reynolds had been a dear friend since college. When James and I needed legal help, Frank was always our first call. He had that perfect combination of sharp legal mind and genuine compassion. "Frank noticed red flags immediately," I continued. "He asked pointed questions about Thomas and Diana's financial situation, about how often the Walkers discussed my home. When I mentioned they'd been measuring rooms and discussing renovations, Frank grew very concerned." "What did he recommend?" Linda asked. "He suggested creating a living trust rather than relying solely on a will. With a living trust, my assets would be protected even if I became incapacitated. Frank helped me transfer ownership of the house to the trust with specific conditions." The memory of that meeting brought a smile to my face. Frank had been characteristically thorough, anticipating every possible scenario. "The trust stipulates that Thomas would receive 25% of my estate only if he provided proper care and support during my lifetime. The remaining 75% would go to a foundation supporting elderly individuals who've been financially abused by family members." Linda's eyes widened. "So, your son and the Walkers have absolutely no legal claim to my house," I finished. "They can't sell it, mortgage it, or even stay there without my permission as the trustee." The following morning, Samantha came to Linda's apartment with additional paperwork. She'd done preliminary research and confirmed that the trust was ironclad. "This is impressive work," she commented, reviewing the documents Frank had prepared. "Your attorney thought of everything, but I still think we should move quickly to remove them from the property." "I want them to stew for a few more days," I explained. "Let them think they've won. Meanwhile, there's something else we need to do." I asked Samantha if she knew a reliable private investigator who could gather evidence about Thomas and the Walkers' intentions. "I want proof they planned this, that it wasn't just a spontaneous decision while I was hospitalized." Linda mentioned her nephew Jake, who worked as a licensed private investigator. "He specializes in insurance fraud, but he's done some work on family disputes. I could call him if you'd like." Jake Rivers turned out to be a godsend. Meeting us at Linda's apartment the next day, he was professional, discreet, and immediately grasped the situation's sensitivity. "I need to understand exactly what happened and what their intentions are going forward," I explained. "Can you observe the house, maybe record conversations if they're outside?" Jake nodded. "I can do better than that. If they've moved into your home and are discussing plans for it, they're likely talking about it in public too. Restaurants, coffee shops, even with neighbors. I'll start with background research on their financial situation, then conduct surveillance." While Jake began his investigation, I focused on recovering my strength with Linda's help. My body was still weak from the pneumonia, requiring rest and continued medication. Linda monitored my health with professional care while providing the emotional support I desperately needed. Martha called daily, offering both legal advice and friendship. "Don't let this break you," she insisted. "I've seen too many seniors give up when family betrays them. You're fighting not just for yourself, but for everyone who's ever been taken advantage of." 3 days after my discharge, Jake reported his first findings. The Walkers' real estate business had indeed failed, but not recently. They had declared bankruptcy 18 months ago. They'd been living in a rented apartment, not a condo they owned. Most damning was audio he'd captured of Thomas and Harold at a local coffee shop. Once Mom settled in that assisted living place, Thomas's voice came clearly through Jake's recording, we can finally renovate the master bathroom and kitchen. The house will be worth at least 20% more with updated amenities. Smart move, son, Harold replied. Sylvia would never have agreed to sell if you'd asked directly. This hospital stay was the perfect opportunity to get things moving. Hearing my son discuss me as an obstacle to overcome rather than a person to care for shattered what remained of my heart. But it also strengthened my resolve. We have enough, Samantha confirmed after reviewing Jake's evidence. Clear proof of intent to deprive you of your property. We can involve the police if necessary. Frank arrived the following day, having flown in once I'd updated him on the situation. Despite being semi-retired, he refused to let another attorney handle what he considered a personal matter. Sylvia, I'm so sorry this happened, he said, embracing me warmly. But I'm not surprised we needed that trust. Unfortunately, what I see in my practice too often is that money and property reveal people's true characters. Together with Frank, Samantha, Martha, Linda, and Jake, we formulated a plan for reclaiming my home. Frank contacted the local police to inform them of the situation, ensuring they understood I had never given permission for the Walkers to move in. We'll go together, Frank decided. 1 week from your confrontation with Thomas, we'll arrive with the trust documents and police support if needed. They'll have 24 hours to remove their belongings. What about Thomas? I asked, my voice breaking slightly. Despite everything, he was still my son. Frank's expression softened. That's entirely up to you, Sylvia. Legally, you could press charges for theft if they've removed or damaged your property. Or you could simply reclaim your home and let the relationship heal with time if that's what you want. I spent hours contemplating that question. Could I forgive such a profound betrayal? Could any relationship with Thomas be salvaged? The mother in me wanted to find excuses for his behavior to blame Diana and her parents for manipulating him. But the rational part knew he was a grown man who had made his choices. On the 6th day, Jake provided his final report. He'd compiled extensive evidence recordings of conversations, photographs of moving trucks at my house, statements from neighbors who'd been told I was moving to assisted living due to poor health. He'd even discovered that Thomas had attempted to contact my bank trying to access my accounts using my personal information. They've been planning this for months, Jake confirmed. Based on conversations I've documented, their intention was to sell your house once you were placed in a facility using your son's power of attorney. They just accelerated the timeline when you were hospitalized. Armed with this knowledge, and supported by my new circle of friends, I prepared for the confrontation to come. The surprise I had planned wasn't just the trust. It was the strength I'd found in standing up for myself and the new family I'd created from people who truly cared about my well-being. Tomorrow, I told Linda as we reviewed the plan one final time. They learn that sometimes the people they underestimate are the most powerful of all. Exactly 1 week after Thomas told me not to return to my own home, our small convoy pulled up to the curb outside. Frank drove with me in the passenger seat. Behind us, Samantha and Martha arrived in a second car, while Linda and Jake followed in a third. Officer David Wilson, a police officer Frank had briefed on the situation, met us in his patrol car. It was early Saturday afternoon, and I noticed several cars parked in my driveway again, more than before. Through the front windows I could see movement and what appeared to be quite a gathering inside. They're having a party, I said incredulously to Frank. In my house. Frank's jaw tightened. All the better. Witnesses to their misconduct. Officer Wilson approached our car. Mrs. Bradford, are you ready? I'll accompany you to establish that you're the legal owner returning to your residence. I can't force anyone to leave immediately without a court order, but I can document the situation and inform them of the consequences if they refuse to vacate within 24 hours. I nodded, suddenly nervous but determined. My support team gathered around me as we walked up the pathway to my front door. Jake hung back slightly, camera discreetly recording the entire encounter. I rang the doorbell to my own home. Again. A neighbor I recognized, Betty from 3 doors down, answered. Her eyes widened in shock. Sylvia, we thought you were in a nursing facility. Clearly not, I replied, gesturing to the group behind me. Who told you that? Before she could answer, Thomas appeared in the doorway, a beer in hand, and a look of utter disbelief on his face. Beyond him, I could see a backyard barbecue in progress through the open patio doors. At least 15 people milled about my garden, including the walkers holding court near my prized rose bushes. Mom, Thomas stammered. What are you doing here? And who are all these people? Officer Wilson stepped forward, introducing himself. Sir, I'm here to accompany Mrs. Bradford as she returns to her residence. May we come in? Thomas's face flushed. This isn't necessary. We can talk privately. I think we're well beyond that, Frank interjected. Sylvia, shall we? We moved forward as a group, effectively forcing Thomas to step aside. As we entered, conversations throughout the house gradually stopped as people noticed us. Diana came rushing from the kitchen, then froze when she saw me with a police officer. What's happening? She demanded of Thomas, who looked increasingly panicked. By now, Harold and Margaret had come inside from the backyard. Harold immediately puffed up with indignation. What's the meaning of this interruption? We're hosting friends. In my house, I stated clearly, without my permission. The guests began murmuring uncomfortably, many making excuses to leave. Within minutes, only my team, Thomas, Diana, and her parents remained in the suddenly silent living room. Frank took control of the situation with professional calm. I'm Frank Reynolds, Mrs. Bradford's attorney. I understand you've taken up residence here without her consent while she was hospitalized. Thomas invited us, Margaret said defensively. He has keys. Having keys doesn't confer ownership, Samantha spoke up. Mrs. Bradford never authorized anyone to move in permanently, much less remove her belongings or give away her bedroom. Harold attempted a different approach. This is a family matter that doesn't require lawyers or police. Sylvia, surely we can discuss this reasonably. We're past discussion, I replied. Frank, please explain the situation. Frank removed documents from his briefcase. This house and all assets belonging to Sylvia Bradford are held in the Bradford Living Trust, established 6 months ago. Mrs. Bradford is the sole trustee with complete legal control of the property. He handed copies to Thomas and Harold. As you can see, there is no legal basis for anyone to occupy this residence without the trustee's explicit permission, which was never granted. Furthermore, we have documented evidence of conspiracy to deprive Mrs. Bradford of her property. Thomas stared at the papers in shock. What trust? What are you talking about? The trust your mother created when she first suspected you and the Walkers might try to take advantage of her, Frank explained. A wise precaution, as events have proven. Diana snatched the papers from Thomas. This can't be legal. Thomas is her only child, her heir. Actually, Frank continued calmly, under the terms of the trust, Thomas will receive only 25% of Mrs. Bradford's estate, and only if he has provided appropriate care and support. Given recent events, even that inheritance is now in question. The color drained from Thomas's face. Mom, you can't do this. We're family. Family doesn't steal from family, Martha interjected sharply. Harold tried another tactic. We were only trying to help. Sylvia clearly can't manage this large house alone, especially after her illness. My client has managed perfectly well for 12 years since her husband's passing, Frank responded, and she has made arrangements for appropriate support that don't involve being displaced from her own home. Officer Wilson stepped forward. Based on the documentation I've seen, and Mrs. Bradford's statements, I'm officially notifying you that you are occupying this residence without the owner's consent. You have 24 hours to remove yourselves and your belongings. Or what? Diana challenged. Or you'll be arrested for criminal trespassing and possibly elder abuse given the circumstances, Officer Wilson replied evenly. Additionally, any damage to Mrs. Bradford's property or belongings will result in further charges. The reality of their situation finally seemed to dawn on Thomas. Mom, please, we can work this out. I made a mistake. For the first time since entering, I allowed my emotions to show. A mistake is forgetting my birthday, Thomas. This was a calculated plan to take everything from me while I was fighting for my life in a hospital bed. It wasn't like that, he protested weakly. We have recordings proving otherwise. Jake spoke up from the back. Detailed discussions of your plans to sell this house once your mother was placed in assisted living. Thomas's face crumpled. Diana said it made financial sense. Her parents needed help, and this house is too valuable to just sit here with only one person living in it. So you decided to help yourselves to my home, to 40 years of memories I shared with your father. My voice remained steady despite the pain. Where were my things going to go, Thomas? My clothes, my books, the quilts I've made, the family photos you've already removed from the walls. Don't blame Thomas, Diana interjected angrily. This was going to benefit everyone. You're being selfish, Sylvia. Selfish, Martha echoed incredulously. For wanting to live in her own home, the one she paid for and maintained for decades. Frank raised a hand for calm. Regardless of motivations, the legal situation is clear. You have 24 hours to vacate. A sheriff will return tomorrow to ensure compliance. And what about Thomas's inheritance? Harold demanded, revealing his true concern. As I explained, the trust allocated 25% to Thomas conditionally, Frank replied. Given these circumstances, Mrs. Bradford may choose to revise those terms. I looked directly at my son. The trust also specified that the majority of my estate would go to a foundation supporting elderly victims of financial abuse by family members. I never imagined my own experience would make me even more committed to that cause. Thomas made one last appeal. Mom, I'm sorry, I was wrong. But where will Diana's parents go? The same place they would have gone if they hadn't tried to steal my house. I answered simply. That's not my concern anymore. 24 hours, Officer Wilson reminded them. I suggest you start packing immediately. As we prepared to leave, I took one last look around my altered living room. I'll return tomorrow with this same group to inspect the property. I expect to find everything as I left it before my hospitalization. Anything missing will be reported as stolen. Diana was furious. This is ridiculous. We've done nothing wrong. Tell that to the judge, Samantha replied coolly. We have more than enough evidence for both criminal charges and a civil lawsuit if Mrs. Bradford chooses to pursue them. We left them standing in stunned silence. As our group walked back to the cars, I felt a complex mixture of emotions, vindication, sadness, but most of all, relief. My home would be mine again, and the people who tried to take it would face consequences. Are you all right? Linda asked gently as we drove away. I watched my house recede in the side mirror. No, I admitted, but I will be. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of activity. We returned to Linda's apartment where I rested, while my team made preparations for reclaiming my home. Frank arranged for a locksmith to meet us the following day to change all locks. Linda and Martha organized a cleaning service to remove any trace of the Walkers' occupation. Samantha prepared additional legal documents in case Thomas and the Walkers contested the eviction. Jake continued monitoring my property overnight, reporting that lights burned until dawn as the unwelcome occupants packed their belongings. Large moving trucks arrived early the next morning. The same ones that had brought the Walkers' furniture in were now taking it away. At precisely noon, our group reconvened and returned to my home. Officer Wilson was already there, along with another officer, ensuring the eviction proceeded peacefully. Thomas's car was still in the driveway, but Harold and Margaret's vehicles were gone. Thomas met us at the door looking exhausted and defeated. They left an hour ago, he said without preamble. Diana went with them. They're staying at a hotel until they figure things out. And you? I asked, noticing packed boxes in the entryway behind him. I'm almost finished. Just a few more things to load. He hesitated. Can we talk, just us? I glanced at Frank, who nodded reassuringly. We'll start inspecting the property, he said, leading the others inside. Thomas and I stepped onto the front porch, the same place where he'd told me never to return just 1 week earlier. How dramatically our positions had reversed. Mom, I know an apology isn't enough. he began, his voice hoarse. What I did was unforgivable. Why Thomas? The question had haunted me for days. We were always close. I thought I knew you. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. It started small. Diana and her parents kept talking about how the house was wasted on just one person, how much it was worth. When her parents' business failed, the pressure increased. Diana said it made no sense for them to be struggling while you lived alone in a 4-bedroom house. You could have talked to me, I pointed out. Instead, you waited until I was hospitalized to steal my home. I convinced myself it was for the best, that you'd be better off in assisted living where professionals could care for you, that the house was just a building. He looked down. I was wrong. So wrong. Yes, you were. I felt no need to soften the truth. Diana and I have been fighting constantly since this happened. She's furious about the trust, blames me for not knowing about it, says I've ruined their financial plans. I raised an eyebrow. Their financial plans for my property? Thomas had the grace to look ashamed. They wanted to sell the house, use the money to restart their real estate business, buy a larger home for all of us to live in together. And what did you want, Thomas? He couldn't meet my eyes. I went along with it. I told myself it was practical, that you wouldn't mind once you understood. I was weak and greedy and a terrible son. Inside, I could hear my team methodically checking each room, documenting conditions, and making notes of any missing items. What happens now? Thomas asked finally. Now I reclaim my home and my life. The locks will be changed today. You will return any items taken from this house. And you will give me space to decide what, if any, relationship we can have moving forward. And Diana, her parents. I have nothing to say to them. The trust will remain in place with revisions removing you as a beneficiary until and unless I decide otherwise. Thomas nodded, accepting this consequence. For what it's worth, I am truly sorry. Not just because we got caught, but because I betrayed you in the worst possible way. Officer Wilson approached us from inside. Mrs. Bradford, we've completed the initial inspection. Would you like to review what we've found before Mr. Bradford leaves? I agreed, following him inside while Thomas remained on the porch. The interior of my home looked strangely vacant. The Walkers' furniture removed, my own not yet returned from wherever they'd stored it. Most of your furniture appears to be in the garage and basement, Frank reported. We've documented some damage. Scratches on hardwood floors, holes in walls from hanging their art-broken china in the kitchen. Your bedroom has been significantly altered, Linda added gently. They removed your bed and dressers. The walls have been repainted. Samantha approached with a legal pad full of notes. We're cataloging everything that's missing or damaged. You can file an insurance claim and pursue compensation if you choose. I wandered from room to room, feeling like a stranger in my own home. Family photos had been removed from walls, leaving ghostly rectangles on the paint. Curtains had been changed, rugs replaced, even light fixtures swapped out in some rooms. In my bedroom, what had been my bedroom, all traces of my existence had been erased. Margaret's bold decorating choices were evident in the dark burgundy walls and heavy drapes that replaced my soft blue sanctuary. They really thought they were staying permanently, Martha observed, joining me in the doorway. They never expected me to fight back, I replied. They saw only an old woman they could easily displace. When our inspection was complete, we gathered in the barren living room. Thomas had finished loading his vehicle and stood awkwardly waiting for final instructions. The damage and missing items will be documented for insurance purposes, Frank informed him. You'll be receiving formal notification about financial responsibility for repairs. Thomas nodded mutely. Leave your keys on the counter, I said. The locksmith is arriving shortly to change all locks. If there's anything else you need from the house in the future, you'll need to contact Frank to arrange supervised access. I understand. Thomas hesitated. Mom, is there any chance we can ever move past this? I considered the question carefully. Despite everything, this was my only child. I don't know, Thomas. What you've done has broken something fundamental between us. Trust once shattered isn't easily repaired. I'd like to try, if you'll let me someday. Perhaps. But not now. I need time. With that final exchange, Thomas placed his keys on the kitchen counter and walked out of my house. I watched through the window as he loaded the last box into his car and drove away, wondering if our relationship could ever be salvaged. The remainder of the day was spent with my support team organizing the return of my furniture, scheduling repairs, and arranging for professional cleaning. By evening, though the house was far from restored to its previous condition, it was at least legally and firmly back in my possession. As everyone prepared to leave, I found myself reluctant to stay alone in the empty house filled with betrayal's echoes. "Would you like me to stay tonight?" Linda offered, sensing my discomfort. "Actually, I think I'll accept Martha's invitation to stay with her until the repairs are complete." I decided. This house needs to be reclaimed properly, and I need a bit more distance before sleeping here again. As we left new locks securely installed, I paused on the front steps. The home I'd loved for 40 years now felt tainted by my son's actions. Yet somewhere beneath that pain was the foundation of countless happy memories with James, with the Thomas who had once been a loving son with friends and neighbors over decades. "It will feel like home again," Martha assured me, linking her arm through mine. "In time." I nodded, turning away from the house toward my new friends, this unexpected family that had formed around me in crisis. "Yes," I agreed. "In time." 6 months passed before my house truly felt like home again. With Frank's help, I filed insurance claims for the damage done during the Walkers' occupation. The settlements covered professional repairs, repainting, and replacement of items that had mysteriously disappeared. Thomas and Diana separated shortly after the confrontation. According to mutual acquaintances, Diana blamed Thomas for not securing his inheritance, while Thomas finally recognized her materialistic motives. Last I heard, she had returned to her parents, who sold their remaining assets to relocate to Florida. The incident changed me profoundly. Where once I had been trusting to a fault, I now approached relationships with healthy skepticism. Where I had been passive about financial matters, I became proactive, working closely with Frank to secure my future against any similar attempts. Perhaps most significantly, I found a new purpose. Martha, Linda, Frank. Samantha and Jake remained in my life, transforming from crisis supporters to dear friends. Together we established the Bradford Elder Protection Foundation, using a portion of my assets to help other seniors facing financial exploitation from family members. "I never imagined ending up an advocate in my 60s, I told Martha one afternoon as we reviewed applications for the Foundation's assistance program. "But it feels right, using what happened to me to help others." Martha, who had become my closest friend and frequent house guest, nodded in approval. "The best revenge against wrongdoers is to create something positive from their negative actions. You've done exactly that." The foundation quickly gained recognition, partnering with legal aid societies and social service agencies throughout the state. We provided emergency housing for displaced seniors, legal representation for those fighting exploitation, and educational programs teaching older adults how to protect their assets. Linda, who continued working as a nurse, referred vulnerable patients to our services. Samantha provided pro bono legal work, while Jake offered discounted investigation services for seniors who suspected family members of financial misconduct. Frank, though semi-retired, served as our legal advisor and board member. My home, once the center of the conflict, became headquarters for our monthly planning meetings. The dining room table where the Walkers had plotted to take my property now hosted strategy sessions for protecting others from similar schemes. As for Thomas, our relationship remained complicated. 3 months after the confrontation, he sent a handwritten letter apologizing again and asking to meet. After consulting with Martha, who cautioned against rushing reconciliation, I agreed to coffee at a neutral location. That first meeting was awkward and painful. Thomas looked diminished, thinner, grayer, his confidence shattered not just by our family rupture, but by his failing marriage and damaged reputation. "I've been seeing a therapist," he told me, hands wrapped tightly around his coffee cup. "Trying to understand how I could have betrayed you so completely, how I could have valued things over people, property over relationships." "And what have you learned?" I asked, keeping my emotional distance despite the maternal instinct to comfort my child. "That I've spent my life seeking approval from the wrong people. That I married someone who saw me as a means to financial security rather than a partner. That I nearly destroyed my relationship with the one person who always loved me unconditionally." I acknowledged his insight, but made no promises. Understanding why you did something wrong doesn't automatically repair the damage done. "I know," he replied quickly. "I'm not asking for forgiveness yet, just the chance someday to earn back your trust." We established careful boundaries after that initial meeting. Monthly coffee dates always in public places. No discussion of financial matters. No requests for assistance or favors. Through these controlled interactions, I gradually saw glimpses of the son I had once known, the Thomas who existed before Diana and her parents' influence. After 6 such meetings, I invited him to see the foundation offices. Not my home, which remained off limits to him, but the downtown space we had leased for our growing organization. "This is incredible," he said, genuinely impressed as Samantha showed him around. "You've helped all these people." 57 families in our first quarter, Samantha confirmed. "We expect to double that next year with our expanded legal team." Thomas turned to me with newfound respect. "You could have just retreated after what happened. Instead, you built something that helps others. That's remarkable." "Sometimes the worst experiences teach the most important lessons," I replied. "I learned I'm stronger than I knew, that new beginnings can emerge from painful endings." 6 months to the day after reclaiming my home, I finally invited Thomas to dinner there. The invitation came with strict conditions. He would come alone, stay only for the planned meal, and understand this was a test of new boundaries, not a return to our former relationship. Martha insisted on being present as my support person. "You've made wonderful progress," she said, "but this is a significant step. Having backup isn't weakness, it's wisdom." Thomas arrived precisely on time, bearing a small potted orchid rather than cut flowers, a thoughtful choice that acknowledged my preference for living plants. He entered tentatively, clearly conscious he was a visitor rather than family in a home that had once been as much his as mine. The dinner wasn't easy. Conversation sometimes stalled awkwardly. Memories of betrayal occasionally clouded the atmosphere. Yet beneath the discomfort lay something fragile but real. The foundation of a new relationship different from before, but possibly stronger for having been broken and consciously rebuilt. "Before you go," I said as the evening concluded, "there's something I want to tell you." Thomas looked apprehensive. "Of course." "I've revised my trust again." I held up a hand as panic flashed across his face. "No, listen. The foundation will still receive the majority of my estate. That hasn't changed. But I've restored a small provision for you contingent not on caregiving, but on continued evidence of personal growth and responsibility." Relief and gratitude washed over his features. "Mom, that's more than I deserve." "Perhaps, but it's what I choose to give on my terms with clear eyes about who you are, both your flaws and your capacity for change." As Thomas left that evening, our relationship stood at a crossroads, not fully healed, but no longer actively bleeding. The trust between us, like the legal document bearing the same name, had been rewritten with better protections and clearer boundaries. Later, sitting with Martha on my back patio, watching the sunset over my carefully tended garden, I reflected on the journey of the past year, from betrayal to advocacy, from victim to voice for the vulnerable, from isolation to meaningful community. "You know what still amazes me," I said to Martha, "how the worst thing that ever happened to me somehow led to the most purposeful period of my life." Martha smiled. "That's often how it works. Our deepest wounds become our greatest strengths when we transform them into service to others." I looked around my reclaimed home, now filled with new memories and meaningful work. The house was the same structure Thomas and the Walkers had coveted, yet it had become something entirely different. Not just a valuable property, but the center of a mission that gave my life renewed meaning. I wonder sometimes, I confessed if I should thank them. Not for what they did, but for who I became because of it. Save your gratitude for those who deserve it, Martha advised wisely. For Linda, who drove you home that day. For Frank, who helped you protect your assets. For the seniors who trust us with their stories of exploitation. She was right, of course. The credit belonged not to those who sought to harm me, but to those who helped me rise above the harm. And perhaps most of all to the inner strength I never knew I possessed until circumstances forced me to discover it. As the sun set on another day in my reclaimed life, I felt profound gratitude not for what I had lost, but for what I had found. Purpose, community, and the knowledge that sometimes our greatest challenges reveal our greatest capacities. Have you ever had someone you trusted betray you? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If you found my journey helpful, please like this video and subscribe to my channel for more stories about overcoming life's challenges. And remember, sometimes when someone tells you to enjoy what they've taken from you, the best response is to create something even better for yourself. Thank you for listening, and until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.